In 2008, we had the collapse of pyramids of what I call private money. You see, up until the 1970s, early 1980s, money was publicly produced, minted by central banks. But with financialization, with these new forms of convoluted debt, the distinction between debt and money, which was always very clear. Money was something that had no capacity to produce more money on its own, interest. Debt was exchanged, but it was not a means of exchange. But with financialization, new forms of very pliable, very dynamic, self-reproducing debt became a means of exchange. So, to begin with, banks started trading with one another, those exotic forms of debt that they were creating. And very soon after that, they started paying on each other by means of this debt. So money became malleable. A lot of debt instruments were transformed into forms of money. So suddenly, it was not just the Central Bank of the United States, the Fed, or the Bundesbank here in Germany, or the Bank of England that were producing money. Private banks started producing their own forms of money. And if you give somebody the capacity to produce money, they produce a hell of a lot of it. And they produce so much that it could not sustain its own weight. So it collapsed in 2008. That was the financial crisis of 2008 in a nutshell. Now, when the private money pyramids collapsed, imploded, combusted, that left the banks insolvent because everybody owed to everyone and no one could pay. So the state came back in, the central banks came in and minted a great deal of money, as well as transferred wealth and income from the poorer citizens to the banks to save them. So we have a very interesting phenomenon from 2008 onwards. Before 2008, the argument in favor of capitalism was that it was like a jungle, like nature, where the fittest survive. And the more efficient you are, the greater your chances of doing well. After 2008, the more bankrupt you were, the greater the capacity that you had to extract value from the rest of society. This is the regime that I'm referring to as bankruptocracy, ruled by the bankrupt banks. The more bankrupt the banks, the more powerful the bankers who bankrupted their banks.